Welcome, folks, to the Open Humans Community Call. We've moved our community calls to occur weekly, which I think means we can expect maybe less people showing up each week, but that's okay, because when it's like 30 people, that might be a little tough for everyone to have a chance to speak. And this week, we don't really have a strong idea of the schedule. Part of it is that I've been super busy with lockdown stuff. My own time is limited. So apologies for that. But what we'd like to share, Bastian and I would like to share some stuff related to quantified flu updates and kind of where we're planning to go with that. Other than that, I think it's pretty much open to people bringing ideas or things they'd like to talk about, related to open humans or various. That's a very broad umbrella. So other stuff that they're interested in. So it's nice to start, especially when there's not too many people, to say hi, remind people who you are. So hi, I'm Mad. I'm Executive Director of Open Humans, and I like to pass things along. I'll pass the ball to Bastian as next on the list.
Hey, I'm Bastian. I'm the Director of Research for Open Humans and a Research Fellow at CRE in Paris on citizen science and peer production. And I pass it on to Kate, I guess, following the order in the notes.
Thank you. My name is Kate. I'm leading Quality of Life Technologies Lab. I'm a computer scientist, and I'm hoping to contribute more to Open Humans. And I pass it to Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary Wolf, Quantified Self and Open Humans board member, and I'm thinking a lot about resting heart rate right now.
And let's pass it to Stephen.
Hi, my name is Stephen Jonas. I work with Gary at Quantified Self, and I currently have a project for the Stephen Keating Memorial Self-Research Study that involves using mental contrasting for picking goals for the day.
Hi.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
You can go. I'll go last, I guess.
Okay. I'm Roger. I'm a cluster headache patient, and I've set up a community where we, as cluster headache patients, try to set up our own community research.
All right. And I can go. I'm Carolina. I've worked with Open Humans in the past with some data integrations, and I'm curious to see like what's going to happen in the future for the quantified flu product.
So with that, I guess we'll move on to talking about quantified flu at least a little bit. I like to emphasize that quantified flu, while being something that's been developed in sort of response to the coronavirus crisis, is not attempting epidemiology. It's trying to understand the individual value that we can find in our data, and that's in wearable device data and in self-tracking. So it was inspired by wanting to know if the wearable device data is providing useful information to better understand when we get sick or feel sick. But I think also understanding how one goes about tracking symptoms to understand how one is feeling and getting sick. And so with that overview of what quantified flu is trying to achieve, I'll pass it along, if it's okay, to Bastian, if you're okay with this, sharing updates on where we are. I can do it if you.
Do you want to highlight the new endpoints for sharing the data, because you've been done the bulk of the work on this, so I don't want to, to steal your credit on that one.
Yeah, so I did some coding work, put on the coder hat, and one of the things that we really want to do was expose the data for people that are choosing to share their data publicly on quantified flu, to make that available to people who might be able to contribute with visualizations. And so we had some discussion on what the data should look like, what format, or how it should be bundled together. And in the end, we've created JSON and CSV endpoints. And so those are now available, and they do, as they do expose more information than is visible on the website. And some of this is like a chicken and egg issue. It's like, it's hard for us to write all of the visualizations to do stuff nicely. And so it'd be really lovely if people can contribute and help on that. And of course, once there's something that makes things visible, we'd love to have that on the site. So yeah, hopefully with that, we'll see visualizations. And visualizations are, I guess, ideally written in JavaScript D3 so that we could take that code and put it on the site right there. But it is also entirely possible for people to write things in R or Python and potentially, share notebooks with people so that they can turn around and visualize stuff via a notebook. It's an extra step, but for some people, like writing stuff in D3 is too much. Yeah, so feedback on like what the data looks like or whether it's enough or missing stuff. There's some stuff that I know is kind of annoying issues that I kind of wanted to improve, but that's very much invited. And now I'll pass it to Bastian, who can highlight all the things I forgot to say.
Yeah, I think we need to like put on the website where one can find the data. I can put it in the Quantified Flu Slack channel after the call, maybe a couple of examples of how the data looks like for people to look at. But I think it's now in a state where we hope at least it will not change the format anymore, at least unless there is a very good reason of why someone needs a different format for their visualization, but that it's stable for people to use. And so for the visualizations, the one point I wrote down is that I have an intern who will soon join me remotely here in Paris to work on this. He's a master's student in computer science. He joined yesterday the Slack, and he is interested in learning D3. And I said, well, if you want to learn data visualizations, we have this data collection that's ongoing. And he's very interested in making the first visualizations on this, hopefully in the next few weeks, maybe. That's probably realistic given how long the bureaucracy in France takes for everything.
Unfortunately, he's not starting until that hurdle is cleared.
Yeah, but so I hope we get some nice visualizations. And I think I would be really interested if anyone has like an idea of how they would like their data to be visualized, because he's just started to do his own data collection yesterday. So it will take a while for him to have any interesting data to look at for himself. But if you have anything that you would like to see on your own data already, this could be a nice starting point.
I think I can anticipate something Gary has mentioned before, and that is that it would be nice to, and this is more than visualization, so, but something to keep in mind, nice to be able to take notes once you have the visualization on the visualization to add notes. So that where people can continue to build that knowledge creation once they see data and they create explanations. So that's something to keep in mind. It would be a little more complex in that we'd have to write an endpoint to receive the notes, that sort of thing, in JavaScript to go to talk to it, and but it's theoretically doable. So something to think about. But other ideas, like you had an idea about a heat map for symptoms, I think, or was that you or someone else?
Yeah, no, this is what I thought. Like if we, instead of having the activity graph of GitHub, which has the weeks on the weekdays on the y-axis, we just flatten this to be just the dates on the x-axis and put I think we have 12 different symptoms we ask for right now. Put those on the y-axis, and you can see on a given day how many symptoms did you have and how strong were they, because we also have it. I think it's a 5-point Likert scale for each of them.
I was kind of thinking like there would be a different x-axis, like a line for each symptom, and then like you could have little circles show up with different sizes depending on how strong that symptom was. So you could track like you had fatigue growing here, and then like different types of symptoms over there, and you can see how different types of symptoms are clustered together.
You could use a timeline like I built for my group.
Yeah, I think this is actually where I got the inspiration for. I think not consciously, but now that you say it, yes, I do remember that the visualizations that the Ubicom people made were very similar to what I had in mind. That's right.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, I call it a timeline. And
maybe we could. share
it's
those with
just
Basile and
matrix of
stuff.
days and hours of the day, basically. And you visualize everything with a dot. And if you make layers, you can turn on and off things. Then you can really put things next to each other in an easy way. You see at least when something happens and what a pattern is of occurring things.
And Gary, I was interested in the taking notes. Would you like to take general notes on the visualization or somehow annotate specific bits of it?
I think that in the end, people are going to want to annotate episodes, basically, because if you imagine continuing the process for many, many days, many, many months, maybe, and then you want to go back and you want to say, you want to search your visualization for the episodes, then you need to have some kind of annotation capacity.
Sometimes you only learn things retrospectively. I know I've been having a lot of fatigue, and for me, one of my thoughts has been, it feels like I'm hypothyroid again. I have thyroid disease and I take thyroid
Can I
hormone.
show a timeline as an example?
Please.
Can I share screen here?
That'd be
Oh
great.
yeah, I can share screen. Screen 1, screen 2, screen 2. What you say is looking back. The funny thing is at least if you look at your own data, like I know my timeline. These are 3 different timelines, you see, of 3 different patients. All are about 2.5 years of data. And the funny thing is you know where things happen. You start to understand your own pattern, you know, when things in what year happen very quickly with this. So to look back at things, it's really easy.
So if I were looking at a timeline like this, and let's say these are headaches, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are headaches. So let's say I had an idea that an allergy or like a food allergy or a stressful episode like emotional upset or something was important for triggering headaches. You know, there would be, as I was going and looking at my data, I would be able to say, okay, on this Monday when I had a really high headache, I had this this potential trigger here, and just note that. And so being able to note that on the timeline itself is a really great tool for exploring.
Yeah, well, I would. My idea in this, because I'm trying to set up a personal report for us as cluster headache patients to start with, and the funny thing is that you shouldn't think, I think, in one plot, but you should think in various plots that you visually display together. So you put different timelines under each other so they correlate with each other.
That seems so great for like a vision too. Putting multiple timelines next to each other visually.
As close as possible, so it becomes one image, you know?
It's not trivial to do that with different kind of data streams. So that would be a huge advance over what people can currently do.
Yeah, for sure. And then if you can for your notes, for instance, you just add one line, and every time that there's a note, you just, or document uploaded or anything else, you know, which is PDF paper or anything like that, or photo, it just shows up on that line and you can click it. Zoom in, zoom out, and see more, see less.
Yeah,
things like that you should think in, I think.
Double thumbs up for sure to that.
Yeah, it sounds like the notes themselves you can think of as another set of timeline information.
Yeah, and they cluster. So you see something, documents over there, and you see 6 because you zoomed out too much in expect of time. So you have to zoom in, so you see a week, and then you see like on a Google map the places get apart from each other because you're zoomed in, you know. And in that way you can see documents as well on your timeline.
I would say something if I didn't just 100% agree. So.
Oh, good one.
I think
just say that.
I just, yeah.
I have some drawings on my computer about those timelines, because there's something else. For instance, like what you see on my screen now are cluster headache attacks. And for me, a cluster headache attack is I call it a short-term symptom. It's something that's happening now. It's a point in time. It's a really clear, I have an attack now. But there are also symptoms that are not short-term symptoms. There are long-term symptoms like your emotion or your lower back pain or things like that. So the way we collect data, it's really hard to collect long-term symptoms at the moment because they don't occur in a moment that you say, well, press a button and I make a registration about it, you know? But also on a timeline, the moment of that registration of a long-term symptom is not so important. It's more the, yeah. So I think that has to go separated as well. Those kinds of symptoms.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to try to explore once the more types of data you get, the more complicated.
Yeah, yeah. But if you work in layers, you can turn things on and off. Then you can, and don't forget, not everybody has all the things we're gonna add to something. You know, everybody has like 10 or 15 items. Well, in my group, I think most collect the, data about 15 symptoms or treatments in total. So it's not that we have like 100 different factors that we are collecting at least.
So,
It's
should we
like,
close? Oh, go on.
no, it feels like we should have someone like convert one of these many genome browsers into the timeline viewer, because they already do all of this, right? They have like the different layers which you can turn off and on, and they are all standardized by chromosome and position instead of time.
Yeah.
It should be doable. I'm not a D3 expert, but it seems like such a common use case. Maybe it's because I hope I'm not biased by my experience with genetics to be able to do something like that.
But also, I feel like then you have like genetics is the one that you and I are familiar with. But I would guess like the economists will have like a very similar thing of wanting to have a timeline. So like these kinds of dashboards, there should be something out there which is maybe adaptable. It would be really interesting to have someone to look into this.
Like an intern?
That's a really good idea. I mean, really, I mean, I don't think anyone, as far as I know, I don't think anybody has ever deliberately set about to take this problem and then canvass or survey the visualization solutions in promising disciplines. And I just think that's very wonderful suggestion, because there may be some things sitting there. I think like I follow some stuff in like digital humanities, and it just, when you said that, I thought, oh, there's people who are doing these like crazy timelines of like Renaissance biography or whatever, because they're trying to sort out who was productive on certain dates, and you know, who might have known each other and stuff like that, probably also using some of these same. But it had never occurred to me to look there for some of this.
But look at this this line. This could be a timeline as well. Like if I look at my cluster headache, every bar here could be a day, and the color of that bar could be the average intensity of the attacks of that day. So you see really quickly what days you've been pain-free and where something was bad again, and where it went better and worse again, you see? And it's a very simple thing you can add to visualizations, I think. We also have like things like this, where we display the intensity based on the number of attacks we have, and then within the bar of the attacks, the amount of the attacks, we also show the intensity of the attacks. So you see very quickly through time how somebody's been.
Roger, do you want to update a little bit on the status of your project? Because I know that it was in a bit of flux. especially in terms of the types of code support.
Yeah, yeah, but that's probably completely solved. I was
That's
here
great.
to tell about that. Well, maybe I can do it now.
Yeah, please.
I got a call from a big IT company in the Benelux, which is the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg.
I think Roger's dropped out.
Your microphone cut out, Roger.
Maybe he signed non-disclosure agreement, and now it's like, automatically kicking in.
I'm actually trying to stop the screen share, and that is not working for me.
I guess, can you just try sharing your screen to override it? That's maybe, because you're the host, that might be the easiest.
If I knew how to, oh. I am sharing my screen now, I guess. And now.
No, at least to me, it's still Roger's.
Yeah, I'm unable to fix this. Would we like to say hi to other people that have joined?
One thing while we are like on the topic of visualization, I was wondering, Carolina, do you know anything from like the more computer sciencey side of things that could be reused for such a data visualization kind of thing of personal data?
Sorry, I was in the kitchen. Okay, so what did I miss?
So I asked whether you know any, like, we were discussing these different timelines for visualizing, like, basically on the x-axis just time, and the y-axis whatever, whether there's any software that could be reused from more computer sciencey software development.
Well, there is Seaborn, which is like a visualization library in Python, and they have like several types of graphs.
Yeah, no, I meant more in like in the sense of like having like dashboards already that people end up using.
Oh, dashboards. Yeah, not really. I don't really know.
I think we're gonna have to wait and see what people find for D3.
Yeah.
There might be some sort of dynamic behavior around zooming that needs to hit an endpoint to get more data, which sounds annoying, but like I think JavaScript's kind of limited in how much it can just like crunch and display at the same time. Yeah, I want to say hi to Mickey, who joined. So feel free to say hi.
I'm still in preliminary kind of observation sort of mode, but I've been enjoying your self-tracking community, and I've invested in some self-tracking initiatives that I'd be more happy to share on Thursday, as well as experimenting with homeschooling and self-tracking. But still, I'm just, I think I mentioned last time, I'm a CRC, or Canada Research Chair in Canada through Athabasca University, researching community identity and digital media. I'd finished a project on self-tracking before, and now I'm looking at this sort of merging into self-research, and I'm interested in the how people are forming communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks for letting me observe and join and talk with you nice people.
Roger, are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I pressed mute while I thought I was unmuting it, and then I just did my talk and didn't see that nobody was doing other things because I didn't hear you. So it was very funny. Okay. Well, basically, I got called by a big IT company in Belgium because a student of Ubicum applied for a job over there. The lady of the interview heard about my project and liked it and called me to ask what I was doing and if I had any technical problems. And then they offered to rebuild the application with a team of volunteers. So that's very great news because I set up a crowdfunding a month ago. I collected like 1,700 euros, but it's a COVID time, so it's no way to fund for anything else at the moment. But so they are willing to rebuild the app. They've set up a Doodle, I think you call it, and it's a team of 7 people that volunteered now to help us out. I'm gonna I'm gonna do an online presentation for them in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think. We're checking the dates now with that Doodle system. And well, that turns out great. It's they say the biggest IT company in the Benelux, so that's a good thing. I've also talked to the director of Migraine Action Switzerland. She appears in my documentary as well about cluster headache and community research. And I've asked her to join the project because all I've set up is done by me as patient, and I think I've brought it to a reasonable level. But to make a next step, you just need somebody on your team that has a medical background to be taken seriously and to really change something. It's a shame, but it is like that. But she's very happy to join the project. She has a lot of contacts. She had like 19 or 18 medical publications about cluster headaches. So for me, that's a fantastic, combination. And I'm in contact with people of Correlate, with the Dutch department and a lady from France, from Paris, I think. And they are willing to help us to create the personal report that we first need for our community to visualize the data. So that's a lot of update.
I remember that Ubicom had created, were you ever able to get like the code that they use for their visualizations? And is that something
Yeah,
where,
I can get it. Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
But it makes no sense.
Like you feel like starting from scratch makes more sense?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna leave it up to Ordina. They're called Ordina. And they they're the professionals. What we've set up is what I could do as a patient and what a student could do just learning to code. So did it work? Yeah. Yeah, better start from scratch. I think. And I'd like to use Notebook for it instead of creating my own setup, because I think as a project, I'm very happy to have my data stored on Open Humans, because it makes that I as a application that we have, I don't have the data of anybody. It's all on Open Humans. I only give a tool to people to collect the data. So I think that's a good 100% privacy by design setup. So if we can use notebooks as well to visualize the data for individual patients in an easy way, like we should not forget that they are patients, so they will not be able to use a notebook, add code or copy paste code and then get visualizations out of it. It should be all log in somewhere and see what's created in the notebook, as far as I think. But well, that's a bit the development on it. Yeah.
Do you have work on the mobile app as well? It sounds like a lot of updates.
Yeah.
No. Is rewriting
We're
the mobile
gonna
app.
rebuild the application.
That's cool. And I guess I had a question for, maybe Bastian knows if there's any updates on Voila. I don't know if you've been paying any attention to it, but I'm reminded.
No, I'm subscribed to their repo and I see people are on it. So, I mean, I think now the turning notebooks into dashboards works in principle. I think I just need to sit down for 2-3 days figuring out how to actually implement it into our Jupyter Hub. I think that's the main limitation right now.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that like Voila requires a newer version of Jupyter than we are currently running. And if I try to install it, then the whole notebook server doesn't start anymore for the individuals. So there's some dependencies between what can be installed at the same time, and we need to disentangle those. Maybe I need to just hope that Tim has a very like free weekend at some point to sit down with me instead of me trying to figure it out by myself.
And what would be interesting, like we discussed on Slack, Bastian, and I think that's for Mickey also interesting, is the fact that you should be able to analyze your data together. Because it's nice to visualize your own data and get your personal insight. But as long as you cannot compare yourself with other patients from the same group, you have no idea who you are. I think.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I'm reminded of a talk. I think it was Don Nafis talking about the power of contextualizing the data for understanding it. It's she's used the term N of many ones.
N of many ones, not N as one, but N of many ones. Yeah, good one.
Yeah, I think that's the main limitation is how to do this technically if you don't want to share any data. So I think it's
well, can't you like you know what I did if I was like before I worked with Ubicum, I received the data of people of my community by email. I edited it by hand into Excel and cleaned it up, and then I used Tableau to create visualizations. So the first timelines I made myself. But to get things done and to understand Tableau, I had to go to the forum of Tableau to ask questions because I was like a newbie, no idea of data analyzing and visualization. So I had to make something. And what I always did, I basically gave like a scrambled a data set for the people that were adding the code. And once they had added the code, that code got transferred basically to my computer and to my real data and rendered for the patients. Because as an analyst, of course, if you want to understand what's in the data, you're a researcher, you need to have the actual data. But if you're just visualizing data for others, you only need a data set that's comparable to what people have. So you see if your plots are working, and then others can render their code. So if you can just put a scrambled layer in between for those that just want to play with that kind of code to see what they can make for a community, then that is enough.
I don't understand, but I think I would agree if I understood, but I don't understand. I wonder if someone can translate.
Well, for instance, instead of sending one set of data to a person that was helping me, I took like 8 lines from one, 10 lines from the next, 2 weeks from another patient, and I just merged it together.
Yeah, fake data is interesting in that it can be really useful, but there's like trying to navigate the Scylla and Charybdis of like not really putting too much identifiable information while making it like realistic looking. Like
what is the purpose? That's what I'm not totally following. What is the purpose
to make data safe so that you can share an example for other people to create visualization without sharing identifiable individual data.
Yeah.
And so there's AI machine learning people that work on trying to create fake data. So like detecting sort of general patterns in data and then generating fake data that looks a lot like the real data.
So it's to support the people who are creating the novel visualizations, Is that so that they can understand what the data looks like?
That's
Yeah.
still going to work mostly for enabling individual visualization stuff. If you have, I mean, with Quantified Flu, our approach is just if you're willing to share it, please do so that to enable people to create visualizations, because then the people making the visualizations are working with real data.
But am I right to think that if you want to empower a community of people to create useful visualizations, you really only need some sample data. So you need a few people who are willing to share their data in order to, you don't need everybody, right? So maybe
Right.
there's just a few
That's
people who
basically
would
what I
share their
mean.
data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically
But
the same idea.
I think I do want to highlight, though, that this is a little different from comparing yourself to others in aggregate, because this is sort of fake data. To do anything like to compare yourself against the community, you need to have some real understanding of what the community data is, which means someone has to crunch that data to produce some sort of aggregate information out of it, which means they probably need access to that underlying data. I think Bastian said Sage Bionetworks is like tried very hard to figure out how to get around that.
Yeah, I mean, I do know that the All of Us initiative really wants this as well, that they want to have like these, you can get notebooks which you can run on the All of Us data somehow, but you never get the raw data, but you can get analysis out of the raw data so that everyone can somehow, if they're a qualified researcher, make use of the All of Us data. But they have a hard time figuring out which kind of data analysis can you allow people to run in these notebooks, which cannot be abused to reproduce the original data. So that's the main limitation, because once you give them access to read the data, even if in a notebook, but the notebook just sends you an email including all the data, then the privacy win of doing it on this notebook is disappearing immediately.
So I think that the approach that Quantified Flu is aiming towards anyway, or the trajectory so far defined, provides some very elegant possibilities for solving these like super large scale conundrums. but to me, what I'm inspired by is kind of sticking to that trajectory that's been defined. So speak really concretely about that, there's clearly a value in having some way to think about more than one person's data at once. So for instance, in writing about resting heart rate, I would like to convince more people to measure their resting heart rate, which means that I need to show that there's some examples of resting heart rate predicting sickness onset. And you can't make some kind of general assertion about that without having more than one person's data. However, you don't need what All of Us is trying to do, which is thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's data in order to reach those conclusions. So I just think in terms of framing our problem as like our community, there is a challenge in creating access to more than one data set. But that challenge might be at the scale of like 5 or 10 or 50, which is a very different kind of challenge and might have a very different kind of solution. And that thinking about it in terms of sort of convincing people that an approach is worthwhile, or convincing a technical person to contribute some of their time and energy in terms of making a visualization, there might only be a few data sets that are needed. I mean, we might even be able just to volunteer our ways into doing that, which is, again, like that's the trajectory Open Humans is sort of already on.
It is also possible to create sort of aggregate average information if you know what it is you want to be comparing against. So if you want to say, like, is this typical for another 40-year-old, this periodicity of fatigue or whatever, but the starting point is that we can look at what other people are already sharing publicly, right? If some people have opted to do that. And then once you have a question, then you can start to look at, can you extract that from aggregate information in a safe way and then present that to everyone? I think it's nice to not kind of get ahead of ourselves with a whole bunch of speculative questions about what we might want to do with comparisons, and maybe let those arise with the data that is available.
And also, just to say the obvious, if somebody really has a strong conviction based on some examples, they could just recruit. They could just like say, we want to do a study, you know, we want to recruit 1,000 people, and then they would be able to do it.
Yeah, I see a little bit two things in the whole data analysis and like on one side you have medical specialists that want to extract knowledge out of it, like I told before, and there's also, from my point of view, I need these timelines that I showed you, or other plots, or just to visualize data, and that's something that can be done by basically everybody that writes R or Python, I think. And those people, in my point of view, could use scrambled data or a fake data set very easy, or like you say, Gary, just a few patients instead of everybody, just to get an idea of what you're creating, so the rest can view their, you know, it's less important to have all the data, I think, than if you do medical research. And then you at least limit already a lot of data sharing, I think.
Then Carolina asked me whether I could share a bit of how the notebooks look like and whether I could do a quick screen share of it. And I thought, if nothing else is currently up, I can quickly do this and show what we are currently having.
Okay.
Sure.
Let me see.
And it sounds like great news that, and just to confirm, Voila has advanced to the point that it's not like it runs the whole thing at once. It somehow stages the running. That's
now
what
allows
we're waiting for.
Yeah, that's what we are waiting for. But now they have like updated so many things that it's incompatible with our current setup of the Jupyter Hub. So waiting was nice in principle, but now we have another issue by waiting for too long.
Yeah, let's reach out to Tim.
Yeah. So the notebooks, I mean, like the usual notebook interface lives on notebooks.openhumans.org. And if you've ever used any notebooks, you see how it looks like. So you can look at the different notebooks that you've written in the past. But the nice thing is you can actually share them easily from inside the notebooks with other people as well. So if you have written a notebook, you want to share it, you can just go to File, Share Notebooks, and upload to OpenHumans. And then it asks you to couple a couple of texts and description of the notebook and so on. But what happens then is it appears in the exploratory of notebooks. And I don't know how many we have right now, but I think it's a good number of them that people have written, and people is mostly me, as the overview shows. Like I've done a lot of different data visualizations through them, which people can reuse now. So you can now pick out a given notebook that you're interested in, and it will give you a description of what it does. You can already see a preview of the whole code of it, as it looked like when I rendered it on my notebook server. And on top here, you can just say open as a notebook, and now it goes right into the Open Humans Jupyter Hub, and you can just basically say run all cells, and it will recreate the visualization for you, but now using your data instead of mine. But in this case, it will look the same because it's the same data, of course. But if Gary were to run it using his GPS data, he would get a different map. And the nice thing is that in principle, you don't need to know any of the code that it's doing. You just press the run button once, and in the end, you get the map. And you can also allow people to make simple adjustments. So I say here, by default, it uses March of 2020 for visualizing the data. And then you get, it's still downloading the map tiles, but once it does the map, you get the visualization for it, which will look like this. Come on. So you will get a map that shows you for the given month, but if you allow people, there we go. So this is how I moved around Paris in March, but now I just changed this one here and say run all below again, and we will see how I basically stopped moving in April because of the lockdown. I think this is what we hopefully should see.
The power and danger of a live demo here. And
there we go, all of a sudden. I've been pretty much at home and just went shopping. That's all that you can see instead. So the idea also is now that in principle, you could say, okay, maybe I don't want to split this up into stationary and walking and say the visualization should look like a single graph instead. And you make some further edits to this notebook and say, this is the visualization I want to actually share. And you can go back and share the notebook with other people who can now use your edited one. So you have like a growing collection of notebooks that can be forked and reused by others. That's the state we have right now, but of course you need to be comfortable enough to do all of this somehow. Like the scary looking notebook interface keeps lots of people off using it, I think. And voila, is this nice little thing which allows notebooks to be rendered without actually seeing any of the notebooks. So it allows to make dashboards like this where it keeps the code hidden, and they have a nice gallery, I think, of live dashboards that people have made using voila. So this is behind the scenes now running a regular Jupyter notebook somehow, but you will hopefully see if their website works and doesn't succumb to demo issues, that you just get a nice website that's somehow presenting the data and also the markdown text that people have written in the notebook and regular code output cells.
Bastian, when somebody looks at a notebook like this that's rendered on a web page, how is the authorization handled for, you know, the notebook running? You have to be running your own server, and
so the visualizations which are in the overview in the gallery, they are completely static. So it just takes whatever you decide to share, how it looks like in this given moment, it's just reproduced on the website.
Got it. That's great. So, that means basically they're, okay, I think I understand, right? So basically but you're sharing, but you're not just sharing the image, you're sharing the visualization that's rendering the data in that image.
Yeah, you're sharing the whole thing of how you ended up getting the images with all the code, and people can really just reproduce it one-to-one. And voila takes this and hides everything behind it. So this is now the voila dashboard, which is, it's just a notebook, but it's an interactive notebook even. You can somehow set different year ranges for this. And if you want, you can always go back to the actual notebook in voila even and see what rendered this.
If I want to,
great. Sorry, I haven't seen this yet. Like,
really
so you can interact with it.
Yeah. So you can even have interactive widgets which allow you to filter. So basically, the idea of the zoomable timeline, in principle, you can do just using a notebook and the voila interface, which hides the messy code behind it.
This is fantastic. And if I want to put my data into this, then how do I do that?
So the way it works through Open Humans right now, it basically, well, this is a very ugly notebook, but it basically takes up here, it hides the whole logic of it, just uses your personal credentials behind the scenes to get your data. Okay. And as you can see, it's now running in my personal notebook server. So if you were to run it, it would have your username there, and behind the scenes have your credentials, so it loads your data instead of mine.
So when I'm looking at it using Voila, then it automatically knows to run my notebook on Open. That's fantastic.
So Voila would be running on the same server, and
it's running on the same server as my Yes.
So could I show the visualization of a notebook also in an application?
Yeah. So I mean, it already works kind of with the old version of Voila. It's now very ugly, but.
So there is hi, Carolina here. Hi. Excuse me. So so Bookie and another like libraries, they have something that you can export the HTML, and it has all like the libraries you need, and then like you just get a HTML, and it's gonna search for like a given file name that like it's already programmed, but you can have like all those interactions and those things. So I think that that's for like users that are not like programmers. I think that that's really cool that you can like change what you want to plot, which variables you want to plot on the fly, and also like you don't need to install, like it installs all the libraries and takes care of all dependencies. So like that's kind of nice, but like of course like it may run with dependencies is with what the user has on their computer already. So and this may be tricky, but it's like I think it's a stage further, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean the notebook, the nice thing is that for every user of our notebooks, it fires up a new virtual machine as like a Docker container. So they are all having the same dependencies installed internally. So the user doesn't have to worry about it at all. They just go to the website and they see it without having to change anything in principle.
But then if you have this HTML, you can have this thing that is just like, it's just an app, right? You don't see any code. So you just see like a drop-down menu where you choose the variables you want to plot and the plot. That's the kind of difference. So it's like, I think, yeah, like this, like both are great, but like for different things.
Yeah, but I mean, this is already also just running in a virtual machine, accessing the data. So this is just a notebook which has gotten a different interface. So it's the exact same thing, which you can do all of these interactive things. You can look at the life expectancy at birth, correlate to.
So this, what is the process you're doing here to get that into Binder?
So that's, I mean, what Binder does, it basically, it's just like a more modular notebook server. You give your dependencies and the code for it, and then it installs, it makes a new Docker image basically based on your.
Yeah, but like what is the process if I'm a user then I'm not a programmer? Like how should I get in, like from that, the code to here?
So I think Bastian was prototyping a launch as voila button for the notebooks.
Oh, okay.
So it already exists. So it's not on the front end, but there is already an API endpoint, which basically from this page would give you open as a dashboard, and it will do everything, and you just get the dashboard.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, in principle, this is now how the Voila dashboard looks like right now in OpenHumans, which is very ugly and unstyled, but there is already a thing where if you press on this one, it should load the rendered Voila thing, which has no code at all. And if we look at it in the test version, we can compare now. This is the original notebook, and this is what is printed. It's again not styled at all, but in principle, the same idea applies. All the code is hidden and it just gives you the output.
So what's nice about Voila is it bridges these. It gives the person who doesn't want to see the code, just wants to see the interface, that. But the code is there so that you can make improvements to it and then share the improved version.
Cool.
Can you give a demo after I've had a presentation with Ordina to them so they understand how this works as well, Bastian?
Yeah, sure.
Because then they can they understand quicker how this works and will be able to decide better what to and how to set it up.
Yeah, of course.
Bastian or Matt or anybody, these notebooks, they take a while to process. What is the cause of that? Why are they, you know, from a perspective of a naive user of apps and websites, why do they take a long time?
So it's multiple things. One is that it needs to get the data from OpenHumans, so it needs to import the data that you request first. It's not already in the notebook, so there's like a bit of data transfer and just loading the data depending on how big it is. So the GPS data sets I showed, they are like 40 megabytes each, and it needs to then process the raw data into like a usable format. So all of this, as it's done on the fly and not pre-processed already, all the things which on a regular website are already done once and they are just stored in this format don't happen in the notebooks. That's why the initial loading time is a bit higher. Also, I think the notebook I showed is like, it takes especially long because it installs a module which is not pre-installed in the notebook container already. So we could easily speed this up by a lot by just pre-installing it. So there's like a lot of things which can be done to make it faster, but overall there's always the step of like, that's why Quantified Flu loads very quickly, because behind the scenes there's proper processing done once, and we just store exactly the data we need for the visualization. So when you get to the website, it just loads the maybe 50 kilobytes of data to just render it in JavaScript and it's there, instead of going through 50 megabytes of GPS records to find the bits which are actually being plotted.
Got it. Thank
To
you.
be clear, we're not collecting GPS for quantified flu,
No,
but
no,
there is. But the intraday Fitbit data can be quite large too.
Yeah, that's where actually we had a bug earlier today, which even like my laptop could not handle, because it got all the Fitbit intraday data into 16 gigabytes of RAM on my MacBook. We're like, nope, that's not enough for actually processing this.
Well, I'm excited to hear Voila has advanced, but yeah, fully hear you on dependencies issues. So hopefully Tim Head is available. We haven't heard from him. He's always in high demand, I guess.
I did try it like at the end of last year for like half a day, and then I just like got it to a point where the notebooks wouldn't start anymore at all. So I rolled it back to like, let's not have Voila, but let's have working notebooks for now.
So we're at the end of the hour, and that was a great way to end. Thank you. Any closing thoughts as we say bye? And I guess we'll be here next week, same time.
None.
Thank you.
Have a nice week.
Stay
and a
safe,
nice
everybody.
Stay healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
See you next week. Bye.
Yeah.
See you.